My mother-in-law took one look at our newborn and accused my wife of cheating, then kicked me out of the house. Let me just start by saying this, I never thought I'd be the guy typing something like this online, much less admitting the absolute insanity my life turned into after becoming a dad. I used to think stories like this were exaggerated or cherry-picked for internet drama points. Now I know better. Because it happened to me. And no matter how many times I play it back in my head, I still can't believe how fast things spiraled out of control. My name's Nick. I'm 31, live in a mid-sized town in Oregon, and work as a graphic designer. My wife, Alina, and I have been together for almost 7 years, married for 4. We met in college, both art majors, both huge nerds for indie films and bad reality TV. We were that couple people either found annoyingly adorable or just flat-out annoying. But we made it work. At least, I thought we did. Things started to shift a bit after we got married, mostly because of her mom, my now infamous MIL, Carol. Carol was the kind of person who seemed sweet and kind on the surface, but every conversation with her had this undercurrent of judgment. Like you could say something completely neutral, oh, I like this salad dressing, and she'd smile and say, oh, I guess that's what people with less refined palates go for. She didn't like me much. That was clear from the get-go. She thought I was too laid back, not ambitious enough, didn't make enough money, wasn't assertive enough, didn't come from the right kind of family. And trust me, she made all of that known, never directly, but through carefully crafted jabs that always had just enough plausible deniability to let her off the hook. And Alina, bless her heart, was so used to her mom's manipulation that she rarely saw it for what it was. Still, we were happy. At least I thought we were. When Alina got pregnant, everything changed, and for a while, it changed for the better. Carol actually seemed supportive. I'm talking full-on crocheting baby blankets, calling every week to check in, buying more Onuses than we'd ever need. I was cautious, obviously. Carol had never given me any real reason to trust her, but hey, a baby can soften even the sharpest edges, right? Our son, Theo, was born 2 months ago. And he's amazing. Absolutely perfect. Big eyes, strong grip, a little tuft of reddish blonde hair that makes him look like a baby bird. I love that kid with every fiber of my being. But here's the thing. Carol took one look at him, and it was like a switch flipped in her brain. She walked into the hospital room all smiles. Alina was exhausted, obviously, and I was half asleep myself from being up all night during the labor. But I'll never forget how Carol's face fell the second she saw Theo. At first I thought I was just imagining it. But no, she looked straight at our son and blinked, and this weird expression spread across her face. Kind of like she smelled something bad, but was trying to hide it. Oh, she said. He's here. Yeah, I said, trying to keep the tone light. Meet your grandson. Alina smiled weakly from the hospital bed, reaching out her arms. Do you want to hold him? Carol didn't move. She gave the most half-hearted maybe later I've ever heard, then sat in the chair next to the bed and started asking about what brand of formula we were planning on using, which was weird, since Alina had said she wanted to try breastfeeding first. The rest of the visit was tense. She didn't take a single picture, didn't offer to hold Theo even once, and kept looking at him with this tight-lipped expression I couldn't read. 2 days later, she called Alina in tears. I wasn't in the room when it happened. I'd gone out to get her some coffee. When I came back, Alina looked completely shell-shocked. Her face was pale, and she was holding Theo like she was trying to protect him from something. What happened? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Just shook her head and said, my mom thinks Theo doesn't look like you. I laughed. I actually laughed. Because what? Is she serious? Alina didn't laugh with me. She said she thinks I cheated on you. That she can't see any of your features in him. She said he's too weird looking. That his nose isn't right. That his eyes don't match yours. She trailed off, then said in a whisper she called him unfortunate looking. I put the coffees down and just stared at her. She said our son is ugly? Alina nodded, eyes filling with tears. She said she's not accusing me directly, but she thinks you should get a paternity test. Just to be sure. I couldn't even speak. I mean, what do you say to something like that? Our son was barely 3 days old, and already his grandmother was implying he wasn't mine, and not because of any real reason, but because she just didn't like how he looked. It only got worse from there. The next week, Carol refused to visit again. She told Alina she was giving us space, but what she was really doing was spreading rumors. I got a call from Alina's aunt asking if everything was okay. A friend of Carol's, some woman I'd met maybe twice, messaged me on Facebook saying she hoped I found the truth. It was insane. Like we were in the middle of some twisted soap opera and I hadn't even gotten a script. Alina was caught in the middle. She kept saying she didn't know what to do. On the one hand, she was furious at her mom. On the other, she didn't want to go completely no contact while we were still adjusting to new parenthood. She kept hoping Carol would come around. That maybe she was just overwhelmed or having some kind of breakdown. Me? I wasn't so generous. I've dealt with Carol's nonsense for years, but this crossed a line. Accusing your daughter of cheating and calling your newborn grandson ugly because he doesn't look the way you expected? That's not just controlling, that's deranged. And then came the day she threw my stuff out. We were still staying in Carol's guest house at that point. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Long story short, before Theo was born, Alina and I had been renovating a fixer-upper we bought a few months back, but it wasn't move-in ready yet. So when Alina's pregnancy got harder in the third trimester, Carol suggested we stay in her guest house for convenience. I resisted, but Alina thought it made sense, and I wanted to support her. Huge mistake. One afternoon, I came back from running errands, diapers, wipes, formula, and found my clothes, laptop, work bag, and even a few framed pictures dumped on the grass outside the guest house. I thought maybe something had happened, like a pipe burst or some random accident, but nope. Carol came stomping out of the main house with her arms crossed and a smug look on her face. "I want you gone," she said. "You've humiliated this family long enough." I looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "What the hell are you talking about?" She sneered. "Don't play dumb. You think I don't know? That baby isn't yours. I knew something was off when I saw him. And now I know the truth." I blinked. "What truth?" "You force my daughter to lie. I know how men like you operate. You don't even have the decency to admit it's not your child, instead you just keep playing pretend." "Well, not in my house. I won't have it." She slammed the door in my face before I could get another word out. I stood there, surrounded by my own belongings, completely stunned. It was like I was in some kind of fever dream. Our son was 6 weeks old. Alina and I were exhausted and overwhelmed and barely managing, and now her mother, the woman who was supposed to be helping us, was going full scorched earth. And she hadn't even talked to Alina before doing it. The craziest part? Alina came running out 5 minutes later, barefoot and panicked, saying she'd just woken up from a nap and had no idea what was happening. Carol hadn't even told her. She just snapped and decided to evict me from her life, and our temporary home, in one go. We left that night. Packed what we could, threw everything into my car, and drove straight to a motel on the edge of town. I remember sitting on that cheap bed, holding Theo while he slept, and just feeling like the floor had been ripped out from under me. How had it come to this? How had becoming a father, something that was supposed to be beautiful and life-affirming, turned into a war zone? I looked at Alina. She was rocking back and forth on the edge of the bed, looking like she'd aged 5 years in a week. "I'm so sorry," she kept whispering. "I'm so sorry." I didn't have the heart to tell her that sorry didn't even begin to cover it. Not because I blamed her, but because deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. We spent that first night in the motel basically not sleeping. Theo, thankfully, snoozed through most of it, like he somehow knew we couldn't handle one more thing on our plate. But Alina and I just sat in that dimly lit room, staring at the ceiling, whispering fragments of conversation back and forth like we were trying to piece together what the hell had just happened to our lives. Every time I thought about Carol's voice, "You've humiliated this family long enough," my hands would clench without me even realizing it. I'd been dealing with her passive-aggressive digs for years, but this was malicious. She wasn't just trying to push my buttons or insult me behind a smile. This was a full-scale character assassination. She genuinely believed, or at least claimed to believe, that Theo wasn't mine. That her daughter, who she supposedly adored, had cheated and then roped me into raising some other man's child. And for what? Because Theo didn't look like me? Because he had chubby cheeks and a squished baby nose? I looked at Alina, curled up on the far side of the bed, her arms wrapped tight around her knees. She looked broken. Like something inside her had cracked. And that hurt more than anything Carol had said. Around 4 a.m., I finally whispered, "Do you believe she actually thinks you cheated?" Alina looked over at me, red-eyed but calm. "No. I think she's using it as an excuse." "An excuse for what?" She shrugged. "For not liking you. For never liking you. For never being able to control me." That hit harder than I expected. Because in a weird, twisted way, it made sense. Carol's always been one of those people who needs to run everything. If she can't direct the play, she burns down the stage. For years, I've watched her try to orchestrate Alina's life, everything from where she went to college, to what dress she wore for our wedding, to what color we should paint our living room. Spoiler, she hated what we chose. And maybe, just maybe, this whole ugly baby cheating husband storyline wasn't something she believed, but something she concocted because it gave her a way to finally exile me from the equation. And if that meant using our newborn son as a prop in her drama, so be it. The next few days were a blur. Alina and I stayed in the motel for the weekend, trying to find a short-term rental we could afford while finishing the renovations on our actual house. Between feedings and naps and trying to navigate our new fractured reality, we barely had time to talk. When we did, it was mostly logistical. Did you get through to the contractor? Yes, they're coming back Thursday. Can you call the pediatrician? I already did, appointment still on. But beneath that surface-level communication, something was changing between us. Something I couldn't quite name yet, but it felt like a shift, like the ground underneath our relationship had been subtly rearranged. Monday afternoon, Alina got a text from Carol. She showed it to me without a word. If you've come to your senses, I'm willing to have a calm conversation. But not if he is present. I will not be disrespected in my own home. I almost laughed. Almost. Because the irony of that message could have fueled an entire comedy sketch. Disrespected? Lady, you threw my underwear on your lawn like I was some stray animal you were shooing away. And now you wanted to talk about respect? Alina didn't respond. She just put her phone down and said, I'm not going back there. Not even to get the rest of our stuff? She shook her head. I'll ask my cousin to swing by. I don't want her near Theo. I don't trust what she might say to him someday. It was one of the clearest things she'd said in days. And I was proud of her for it. But part of me still wondered if that line would hold. By Tuesday, we'd found a month-to-month rental, a small one-bedroom apartment with questionable plumbing and a weird smell in the hallway, but it was ours. I remember walking in for the first time, carrying Theo's car seat, and thinking, well, this isn't where I imagined bringing my son home to. But it's a start. The next few weeks were filled with slow, painful adjustments. Alina was quieter than usual. She threw herself into Theo's care with a kind of frantic energy, tracking every feeding, every diaper, every nap, like if she just managed everything perfectly, she could make up for the chaos surrounding us. I didn't push. I figured she needed time. But the space between us kept growing. At first, I blamed Carol. Of course I did. She was the one who started this. But then I started noticing the smaller things. Like how Alina wouldn't look me in the eye when Theo cried in a certain way. Or how she flinched when I joked about whose nose he inherited. One night, while I was rocking Theo back to sleep, she came up behind me and said softly, "Do you ever think he looks strange?" I turned to face her. Strange how? I don't know. Just not like either of us. I stared at her, trying to read between the lines. Are you saying you think he's not mine? No, she said quickly. Too quickly. No, of course not. I keep looking at him, and I'm so tired, and my brain starts going weird places, and I cut her off gently. Alina. Stop. He's our son. He's yours. He's mine. End of story. She nodded, but I could see the guilt behind her eyes. Carol's poison had seeped deeper than either of us wanted to admit. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about a cruel comment, or even about an accusation. This was about doubt. About how easily it could worm its way into a person's mind, especially when they were vulnerable, and twist everything out of shape. It was about the cracks that formed in a relationship when you let other people start dictating the narrative. I wanted to protect Alina. I wanted to protect Theo. But I also needed to protect myself. Because this wasn't just Carol's war, it had become ours. Later that week, I did something I hadn't planned on. I ordered a home paternity test. Not because I doubted Theo was mine. But because I needed proof. Hard, scientific, irrefutable proof that Carol could shove down her throat the next time she opened her mouth. I didn't tell Alina right away. I wanted to. But I knew how it would sound, like I didn't trust her. Like I was feeding into Carol's insanity. But this wasn't about mistrust. It was about defense. About preparing for the next bomb Carol might throw. The kit arrived in a discreet box 2 days later. I swabbed Theo's cheek while he cooed in his little bouncer seat, then mine. Sent it off with shaking hands. 2 weeks later, the results came in. 99.9999% probability of paternity. I showed Alina the envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it. When she read the numbers, she started crying, not in relief, but in pain. I never should have let it get this far, she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just held her. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't pull away. That night, we sent Carol a photo of the results with a simple message, "Don't contact us again." She responded with a single sentence. DNA doesn't make a man a father. I stared at the screen for a long time before deleting the message and blocking her number. It wasn't about DNA. Not really. It was about love. It was about showing up when it's hard, when you're scared, when your whole life has gone off the rails. It was about staying up all night with a newborn in a motel room, wondering how the hell you got here, and still finding a way to smile at 3 a.m. because your son finally burped after hours of fussing. It was about choosing your family, even when others try to tear it apart. And for me, there was no more doubt. The message Carol sent, "DNA doesn't make a man a father," stuck in my brain like a splinter. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The paternity test wasn't for her anyway. It was for me. For Alina. For us. But even as I blocked her number and tossed my phone face down on the nightstand, I couldn't shake the weight of what she'd tried to do. I think what disturbed me most wasn't the accusation. It wasn't even being thrown out of her house like a criminal. It was how close she came to getting away with it. To planting that seed of doubt, not just in me, but in Alina, the woman I loved, the mother of my child. For weeks, Carol had been chipping away at our bond from a distance, weaponizing her own daughter's vulnerability, turning Theo's very existence into something shameful. But the test had shut that door. Or at least, I thought it had. A week after we sent her the results and blocked her number, Alina started getting calls from unknown numbers. They were always short. Always the same general tone, guilt-trippy, fake concerned, or outright hostile. "I just want to make sure you're okay. Your poor mother is heartbroken. Is this really how you want to raise your son? With no family?" The worst was when a woman named Donna, Carol's longtime best friend and fellow petty gossip, left a voicemail saying, "A mother's instinct is rarely wrong, Alina. If you keep defending him, you'll regret it someday." That one pushed me over the edge. I was sitting on the couch when Alina played it for me. Theo was in my lap, dozing, and I felt my whole body tense. I handed him over gently, stood up, and said, "That's it. We're getting a lawyer." Alina blinked at me. "A lawyer? For what?" "For harassment. For defamation. I don't know. I just know I'm not letting her, or her flying monkeys, drag your name or mine through the mud anymore. This has gone too far." Alina didn't respond. Not right away. But that silence told me everything. She was still stuck in that weird limbo between daughter and mother. Between wanting peace and knowing it would never come. I knelt in front of her. "Listen to me," I said. "You don't owe her anything. Especially not after everything she's done. She's not entitled to Theo. She's not entitled to you." Alina closed her eyes. "It's not that easy. I know. But it needs to be." And then, for the first time since everything started, Alina said the thing I'd been waiting to hear and dreading. "I don't think she ever really loved me. Not in the way a mom is supposed to." That broke my heart. Because I think she meant it. From that point on, something shifted in Alina. It was subtle at first, but noticeable. She stopped checking her phone as much. Started smiling more when Theo giggled. Let herself fall asleep on my shoulder instead of pacing the floor all night. We were getting better. Or so I thought. About 3 weeks later, Alina's cousin Maya texted her late at night. "Hey, just wanted you to know that Carol's been talking to a lawyer." Alina sat bolt upright in bed. "What kind of lawyer?" Maya responded within seconds, "Family law. She told Aunt Janice she's looking into grandparents' rights." I stared at the message like it was written in another language. "That's not a thing," I said automatically. "Right? She can't do that." But I wasn't sure. After a few panicked hours of late-night research and calls to a local legal advice line the next morning, we confirmed the horrifying truth. In our state, under certain conditions, grandparents can petition the court for visitation, especially if they can argue that they had a previously close relationship with the child, or that cutting them off would cause harm. Carol had never had a close relationship with Theo. But that didn't mean she wouldn't try to lie her way through the paperwork. "She's going to try to paint us as unstable," I said, pacing the tiny living room. "She'll say we're squatting in a temporary rental, that we're unfit, that we're isolating you. Hell, she might even bring up the paternity stuff and pretend like she was just concerned." Alina sat at the kitchen table, with Theo bouncing gently in his rocker beside her, her hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. "I want to believe she's bluffing," she said quietly. "But I don't know anymore." We consulted a real lawyer the next day. Paid for the hour out of our savings. Explained everything. The eviction. The accusations. The texts. The calls. The lawyer, a blunt but kind woman named Sharon, was unimpressed. She's got no leg to stand on, Sharon said. Grandparents' rights are tricky to pursue, and she's already burned any bridge she could have used. But you need to document everything. Every message, every call, every voicemail. If she keeps escalating, you may want to file a restraining order. It's better to be prepared. So we did exactly that. Alina created a separate email folder. Saved every voicemail. Took screenshots of every unknown number. We even installed a doorbell camera at the apartment, just in case. It was exhausting, but it felt like taking control. And slowly, as Theo hit his 3-month milestone, things started to shift again. He was smiling more, responding to our voices, sleeping longer stretches. Our house was nearly done. The days weren't quite so dark. Until Carol showed up. Again. It happened on a Saturday morning. I'd just finished feeding Theo and was burping him on my shoulder when someone banged, not knocked, banged, on our door. Alina was in the shower. I opened it without checking the peephole. Big mistake. There she was. Carol. Standing on the other side with a look that could have curdled milk. She tried to step forward immediately, but I blocked the doorway. What do you want? I asked flatly. Carol tilted her head like a cartoon villain. I want to see my grandson. I shifted Theo in my arms, instinctively pulling him closer. No. She laughed. Actually laughed. You think you can keep him from me forever? You have no idea what you're getting into. I started to close the door. She put her hand out. I will get visitation, she said, voice rising. And when I do, I'll make sure he knows who his real family is. Not some deadbeat liar who. I slammed the door. She stood there for a while, yelling things I tried not to hear. Alina came out of the bathroom halfway through, still in a towel, eyes wide with panic. I mouthed it's her, and pointed to the door. 5 minutes later, the police arrived. I hadn't even called them. Our neighbors had. Carol was escorted off the property with a warning. The officer said it was best if we filed a report, just in case she tried anything else. We did. And then we filed for a no-contact order. The next few weeks passed in a haze of anxiety and fear, but no more knocks. No more calls. The order had done what we couldn't, created a real boundary. When we finally moved into our own house, fully renovated, quiet, peaceful, it felt like surfacing from underwater. Like we could breathe again. I remember standing in the nursery, watching Alina rock Theo in the chair we bought together, and thinking, this is it. This is our life now. No more chaos. No more interference. And for a little while, that was true. But Carol wasn't done with us yet. She just changed tactics. I should have known peace was going to be temporary. That's the thing about people like Carol, they don't retreat, they reload. And when controlling someone directly doesn't work anymore, they find subtler ways to worm back in. I thought the restraining order would finally slam the door shut, but all it really did was make her more careful, more manipulative. At first, it started with mutual acquaintances. A neighbor from our old street stopped me at the grocery store and said, I saw your little guy on Facebook, such a cutie. Carol posted some throwbacks and said how much she misses him. I blinked. Wait. She's posting about Theo? She said she hasn't been allowed to see him. That she's just praying for your family. It sounded so sad. That word, praying, was straight out of Carol's playbook. She knew exactly how to use it. Frame herself as the helpless, heartbroken grandmother. Cast us as cold, vengeful, ungrateful. She'd never mention what she actually did, of course, the accusations, the eviction, the borderline harassment. No, that didn't fit her narrative. Alina was livid when I told her. She's building a case, she said, pacing the kitchen. Even if she can't do anything legally, she wants sympathy. She wants people to think we're punishing her. Let them think what they want, I muttered. They didn't live through it. But it wasn't just social media. About a week later, we got an anonymous letter in the mail. No return address. Just a folded piece of paper in neat cursive writing. I know families are complicated, but cutting a grandmother out of a child's life is something you'll regret. One day Theo will ask why he never got to know the woman who loved him. And what will you say then? No signature. I scanned it and sent it to our lawyer. Sharon wasn't surprised. She's laying groundwork, she said. Don't respond. Don't engage. Just keep documenting. But it was eating away at us. We couldn't even enjoy our own home without wondering when Carol might find another way to invade it. Annalena was struggling, not just with the grief of losing her mother, but with the guilt Carol had spent a lifetime drilling into her. Every time Theo hit a milestone, I'd see this flicker of hesitation behind her eyes. Like she wasn't sure whether she was allowed to feel happy without her mother watching. One night, I found her sitting in the dark nursery, holding Theo close, tears streaking down her cheeks. She never really loved me, she whispered. Not unconditionally. It was always transactional. I sat on the floor beside her. She loved control. Not people. She didn't say anything, but she didn't disagree. Then came the final blow. We got a letter from Carol's attorney. It was a formal request for mediation regarding visitation rights. Not an actual lawsuit, not yet, but the kind of legal toe in the door that she could later point to and say, see? I tried to resolve this civilly. I didn't even let Alina read the whole thing. Just handed it straight to Sharon. This is ridiculous, I said. She's never even bonded with Theo. She hasn't seen him since he was 6 weeks old. She called him ugly. She accused her own daughter of cheating. She won't win in court, Sharon assured us. Not with the documentation we have. But she's trying to wear you down. She wants you to give in before it gets that far. It was a strategy Carol had used for years, break you slowly. Make it easier to just say yes than keep saying no. But not this time. We declined mediation. Officially. Sharon sent the letter herself, outlining Carol's previous behavior, the restraining order, and our unwillingness to participate in anything further. And just like that, it stopped. The letters. The voicemails. The anonymous messages. Silence. For the first time in what felt like forever, the noise fell away. We had quiet. We had space. We had each other. Theo turned 6 months old. He started crawling. Alina went back to painting in the afternoons when he napped. I took on freelance work from home so I could spend more time with him. And we talked. Really talked. About everything. About how Carol had been slowly eroding our boundaries for years. About the ways we'd both rationalized her behavior because that's just how she is. About how we were going to break that cycle, not just for ourselves, but for Theo. I don't want him to grow up thinking love comes with strings, Alina said one night. I want him to know we love him just because he's him. And I nodded. Because that was it. That was the whole point. Theo wasn't some bargaining chip. He wasn't proof of anything. He was our son. Ours. And no amount of manipulation or drama could change that. That weekend, we packed up everything Carol had ever given us, the baby clothes, the crocheted blanket, the framed ultrasound she insisted on paying for, and dropped it off at a donation center. It felt like shedding old skin. After that, it got easier. There were still rough nights. Still moments where Alina would instinctively reach for her phone, thinking she should call her mom. Still flashes of doubt or pain when someone asked about grandparents. But there was also laughter. Walks in the park. Theo's first real giggle. Sleep-deprived mornings that felt like chaos and magic at the same time. We built our own traditions. No drama. No guilt. Just love. And for once, that was enough. It's funny, when you go through something like this, you think the hardest part is going to be the blow-up. The moment everything shatters. The accusation. The screaming. The door slams and the threats. And yeah, those moments hurt, but the real pain? It sneaks in later. When things get quiet. When the dust settles and you're left staring at the people still in your life, wondering what's broken beyond repair and what might actually heal. For us, it was a slow rebuild. Not because Alina and I didn't love each other, we do, but because trust takes hits in ways you don't always expect. Carol's accusations had put a wedge between us that neither of us wanted, but couldn't ignore. That question, what if? Even if you never say it out loud, has weight. Alina had questioned herself, I had questioned the world, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Theo just kept growing. Innocent. Unbothered. Oblivious to the mess he was born into. I think that's what saved us, honestly. Watching him smile at us every morning like we were his entire universe, which, to be fair, we were, kept us grounded. He didn't care about DNA or drama or family history. He cared that someone picked him up when he cried, that he got milk on time, that there was a warm chest to fall asleep on. That was enough for him. And we slowly learned to let it be enough for us too. It's been almost a year since the day Carol threw my stuff on the lawn and told me I was an imposter in my own family. We never heard from her again after the letter from Sharon. Not directly, anyway. Word trickled in through the family grapevine now and then that Carol had started telling people we were the ones who'd shut her out, that we'd twisted Alina against her, that she'd always had a bad feeling about me, and now she was proven right. I used to get angry when I heard that stuff. Used to clench my jaw and pace the house and mutter about narcissists and smear campaigns. But these days? I mostly feel pity. Because what kind of person looks at their own grandchild, their flesh and blood, and thinks, how can I use this to get control back? And more than that, what kind of person loses their daughter and grandson and still thinks they're the victim? We stop trying to explain ourselves after a while. You can only defend your truth so many times before you realize the people who believe you already do, and the ones who don't, never will. We made a choice to focus on the life we were building. Not the one Carol tried to destroy. And that life? It's actually good. Our house is finally finished. Theo's room is painted a soft forest green with little stenciled clouds on the ceiling. He's walking now, wobbling around like a drunken penguin and crashing into furniture with full-bodied enthusiasm. Alina's back to painting regularly, selling some of her work online. I picked up a few steady clients and work out of a cozy little office in the spare room. And we laugh again. A lot. Sometimes, we'll just sit on the couch after Theo's gone down for the night, a glass of wine in hand, and replay everything that happened. Not because we want to dwell on it, but because it still feels unreal. Like, did that seriously happen? Did your mom really accuse us of faking parenthood because our baby didn't meet her aesthetic standards? Yes. Yes, she did. There was one night in particular, I think it was Theo's first birthday, when Alina and I were sitting out back under the string lights we'd finally installed. Theo was asleep. The leftover cupcakes were half eaten on the table. And she looked at me and said, "Do you ever think he does look like you?" I smiled. "You mean besides the fact that he's got my exact hairline and the same annoyed face I make when someone wakes me up too early?" She laughed. "I don't know. I think I see it more and more now. Back then, I couldn't tell. I was too tired. Too stressed." "You mean too poisoned?" I said softly. She nodded. "Yeah. That too." There was a pause. "I'm sorry I let her get to me," she said. "You didn't let her do anything. That's what she does. It's not your fault she was your mom." She wiped at her eyes and took my hand. I wish things could have been different. I didn't ask if she meant different with Carol, or with us, or with Theo. It didn't matter. The wish was the same, a life without that kind of pain. We sat there for a long time, just holding hands in the quiet. And I realized then, we'd already broken the cycle. Theo would grow up loved. Protected. Free from that kind of twisted emotional warfare that passes for parenting in some families. He'd know boundaries. He'd know unconditional love. He'd know that parents make mistakes, but they don't weaponize them. That love isn't a bargaining chip. We didn't need Carol to validate that. We didn't need anyone to. We had everything we needed sitting right there between us, in a tiny baby monitor on the table, snoring through a stuffed giraffe. I won't pretend we're perfect now. That trauma doesn't leave fingerprints. There are still triggers, still moments of doubt, still awkward silences when someone asks if Theo has any grandparents. But we are healing. Together. And every time I look at my son, I know I made the right choice. Because the only uglier thing in this story was the cruelty of someone who couldn't see past their own ego. And now? Now we're finally free of it.